Welcome everyone to Polyphony's final Zoom session for 2022. I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce Terry W. York, who will be retiring this December from Baylor University's George W. Truett Theological Seminary as Professor of Christian Ministry and Church Music. Terry happens to be Dr. York for one like me, as he is my former professor in the School of Music at Baylor and at Truett Seminary. And likewise, there are several present now in this live session who are former students of his, and I know there will be others to watch this recording later who are former students. Besides the countless alumni, faculty, and staff at Baylor and Truett, there are countless others outside of the green and gold sphere who have been tremendously blessed and influenced by this consummate teacher and writer. Ministers of music and pastoral musicians have certainly been impacted, but they are not the only ones. Pastors of all stripes and countless congregants have been touched. From choir lofts to pulpits to pews, Terry's reach is wide as much as it is deep. Before joining the faculty at Truett Seminary in 1998, he served 3 years as the associate pastor of Park Cities Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. He received the Bachelor of Arts degree from California Baptist College, now University, and the Master of Church Music and Doctor of Musical Arts degrees from New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. He has been minister of music in churches in California and Arizona. From 1984 to 1995, he served in the church music department of the Baptist Sunday School Board, now known as Lifeway Christian Resources in Nashville, Tennessee. His duties there included being the project coordinator for the Baptist Hymnal 1991. In all, Dr. York has published more than 40 hymns, including the well-known Worthy of Worship. His hymn, Give Us Courage, was commissioned by the Truett Seminary administration and approved by the Truett Seminary faculty as the official seminary hymn in 2006. And in addition to his hymns, Dr. York has published more than 60 choral anthem texts set by a number of composers, including the names like these: Mark Blankenship, David Bolin, Bob Burrows, Vicki Tucker Courtney, David Danner, Taylor Scott Davis, Tom Fetke, Dan Goler, Benjamin Harlan, Mark Hayes, Victor C. Johnson, Mary McDonald, Joseph Martin, Anna Laura Page, John Purifoy, Joel Rainey, Erlene Rentz, Jay Rouse, David Schwebel, and Vicki Hancock Wright. His book titles include Let Our Words Become Flesh, Words for Worship, a collection of prayers and litanies, benedictions, and poems, The Worship Matrix, and The Voice of Our Congregation, both co-authored with David Bolin, and Rehearsing the Soul and Observing the Rests, which I will add have both been a meaningful part of many of my choir rehearsals over the years in different churches. In June 2009, the Baptist Church Music Conference gave Dr. York the W. Hines Sims Award, its most prestigious recognition. Several colleagues among us here today, and some who cannot be with us today, have shared their sentiments of their dear friend and esteemed colleague. I offer these. Quote, Terry's work has meant so much to so many people. I appreciate the deep theological thought he has put behind all that he writes and in his teaching. He has been and will continue to be a treasured colleague. Quote, when I think of the warp and woof of Terry's words and work, I see and hear him holding on to the realities of the congregational life in one hand while reaching with the other towards the heavens. He is preacher and poet, musician and minister, a man of the people, and a man for all seasons. Quote, Terry's friendship has been genuine. His counsel has been tremendous. His modeling of a life and ministry centered upon Christ and Christ's calling has been exemplary. His impact upon the organizations he has served and led has been significant. And Terry's mind and spirit have been instruments for God to touch thousands of lives. But enough of my words and the words of my colleagues. Let us now hear from the wordsmith himself. Terry, Dr. York, welcome.
Thank you, Kyle. After that introduction, I think we should just quit now while I'm ahead. Thank you. Dale, did you and I do an anthem one time together? Oh.
We talked about.
Oh, okay. I couldn't remember if we actually had gone through with that or not. You got smart.
But I'm waiting.
Thank you, Kyle. Sincerely, thank you very, very much. That I'm working to maintain my composure here. Thank you very much for that. And it's so meaningful to me to look across the gallery of pictures and see folks that I have known for many, many years and in different settings, and that I've known not so long, but still just as meaningful to me as friends. It's really quite encouraging and moving and humbling. What I'm going to do today, at least as we get started, is I'm going to share with you sort of an outline of my life and work. And this is at the request of others. I would not do this on my own. Outline of an overview, I guess is a better way to put it, an overview of my life and work as a person and as a church musician. And I'll have a script. Script will keep me honest. The script will keep me focused. It will keep us moving. But I may get off script now and then as the Spirit leads. And if you have a question along the way that you just need to ask, raise your hand or something, let me know, and I'll try to recognize that and respond. But there certainly will be time at the end, or I plan for there to be time at the end for us to have conversation and questions. So let me go ahead and just get started with the script. As I said, I will venture off of it occasionally, perhaps, but I will definitely leave time for us to talk about some of these things. So here we go. This is Tomorrow is Trash Day. The unusual title for this session will be explained in the body of the presentation. But I've been asked to give you this overview of my life and ministry, and then we'll take questions, any that you might have or may not have any. Our ministry as church musicians touches all of life. I was born, I'll start there. I was born on March 29th, 1949. So that you don't have to do the math, I'm 73. I was born March 29th, 1949 in Atchison, Kansas. I became a Christian, to the best of my understanding of that phrase, on Easter Sunday, 1957, in the Emmanuel Baptist Church of Gardner, Kansas. It's a little suburb of Kansas City. I think it's now part of Greater Kansas City. It was a suburb out in the boonies, separated by several wheat fields and cornfields from Kansas City when I was born and when I was baptized. My father was a career Marine. So over the years of my time with my family of origin, we lived in several places across the country. Obviously Atchison, Kansas, as I just said, and in Olathe, Kansas, but also Santa Ana, California, St. Cloud, Minnesota, Rockford, Illinois. This was all with my family of origin. So we moved around quite a bit thanks to the Marine Corps. And I graduated from Atchison High School in 1967, goodness. From California Baptist College in 1973, and then from New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary in 1975, and again in 1985. Between high school and college, I spent a short time in the Marine Corps, and then later I served two churches full-time as minister of music, Southside Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona, and First Southern Baptist Church in Sacramento, California. They now call that church Capital City Baptist Church, I believe. My wife and I were married in Fresno, California on April 4th, 1972. That's 50 years ago. We've celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary in April. We have 2 children and 3 grandchildren, and all of them live right here in Waco. And I'm in my office at Baylor. By the way, you see the shelves behind me look a little bare. That's because I'm giving away books as fast as I can, so I don't have to carry them home. And so you're seeing some empty spaces there. So anyway, the whole family's in Waco, kids and grandkids. In January of 1984, I began working at the church music department, the Baptist Sunday School Board in Nashville, as has already been said. There I worked as the youth and adult music consultant, and then as literary editor of youth and adult music periodicals. And then finally as a project coordinator, well, not finally, next was the project coordinator of 1991 Baptist Hymnal. And then finally, as the manager of the field services section, we did Ridgecrest and Glorietta and all the conferences and that kind of thing across the country. And it was my privilege to work with those folks. In those positions, I worked with some remarkably talented church musicians in Nashville and beyond. It was a remarkable experience to work with the people I worked with, whose offices adjoined mine up and down the hallway, and then to work with outstanding ministers of music, some of whom are here today: R.G. Huff, Dale Peterson, Doug Haney. Back in those days, there was a great family of ministers of music, and so it was a great opportunity. It was a wonderful opportunity. Worked with talented church musicians in Nashville, across the country, and our work was very, very demanding in Nashville in those days, but rewarding. Then in August of 1995, after 11 years in Nashville, I joined the staff as the associate pastor, the Park Cities Baptist Church in Dallas. I served there only 3 years before being called to the fledgling seminary at the time, George W. Truett Theological Seminary here at Baylor. I came as associate professor of Christian ministry and director of the Doctor of Ministry program at Truett Seminary. Over time, that changed to professor of Christian ministry and church music, because a few years into my time here at Baylor, I was asked by the university to go half in the seminary and half in the School of Music. That lasted for 8 years, and then I came back fully into the seminary. So my title has changed a little bit. And I'm in my 25th year now at Baylor in Truett Seminary, which is hard for me to imagine. 25 years. I'll retire at the end of this academic year. I stopped teaching in December, as Kyle pointed out. Technically, I'm still on the payroll until May. They give me time. They're going to pay me that final spring semester to finish cleaning these books out and finish paperwork and all that kind of stuff to get out of my office. So as I said, 4 years into my tenure here, I stopped being director of the Doctor of Ministry program at Truett and accepted that dual appointment with the School of Music. And there it was my deep privilege to work with Randall Bradley and David Music. It was like old home week every time we had a faculty meeting in that bunch, because we'd been together with David Music since college days, and with Randall, he was a frequent leader for us at Ridgecrest and Glorietta. So I stayed there in 8 years and then returned full-time back to Truett Seminary. Now, all of my memories of church, from the very youngest memories until last night choir rehearsal, all my memories of church and school and of being a Christian have church music attached to them in one way or another. That's true from the very earliest memories to and including, like I said, right last night. Our gathering here this morning attaches you, as far as I'm concerned, attaches you to that story that begins with a lady named Miss Faye Wilson teaching us little Sunday school courses and songs in the basement of the Carroll Baptist Church in Atchison, Kansas, in those early 1950s, when Harry Truman was president of the United States and our flag only had 48 stars in it. And the population was 120 million people. We thought, how in the world could it ever grow beyond that? My earliest musical memory is of my grandparents and parents gathered around an old upright piano made somewhere in Chicago. That thing must have weighed 2 tons and was never in tune. But it was the center of family life for parents and grandparents. Whenever we could get together, we would end up singing hymns, all of them from the Broadman hymnal. And it's an interesting thing, and what we'd do, we would call out a number, our family. It was like Sunday night in a little church. We'd call out a number and sing, and we would turn to the number, but not look in the book. We just turned to the number, make sure it was still right, and it was, and then we'd sing from memory. Music enhanced, even created family as I knew it. One of the earliest songs I remember from my Sunday school, other than Jesus Loves Me, was Faye Wilson teaching us this: I'm in the Lord's army. To the best of my recollection, it went like this: I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never zoom o'er the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. That is stanza one, and the refrain. I'm in the Lord's army, I'm in the Lord's army. I may never march in the infantry, but I'm in the Lord's army. Oh, I remember, and we stood and we marched. You couldn't sing it sitting down. We stood and we marched. But here's something else I remember. We boys, I don't know how the girls took it, but the boys in that little Sunday school area in the basement of Carroll Baptist Church singing that song in the 1950s. World War II was over, just barely. Korea was underway. We boys sang this song with a measure of sadness to think that we might not get to be heroes like our fathers and our uncles, but would, as a consolation prize, have to settle on being in the Lord's army. I remember that distinctly. I couldn't articulate it then like I can now, but I remember the feeling. Oh man, these wars are going to be over before I grow up. I'm not going to get to do it, but well, I'm in the Lord's army. I'm in the Lord's army. We must be careful, very, very careful about what we teach children. I ended up joining the Marine Corps after a while, but was discharged because of a heart valve problem before I could see combat. By the way, I knew about that heart valve problem. I just forgot to tell the Marine Corps. And they found out about it 2 years in and decided that they weren't as proud of me as I was, and they could do without me. And I got an honorable discharge after 2 years because they found that heart valve. I was on my way toward combat, stopped short. Thanks be to God. It was disappointing at the time. It was a blessing I see now. So after I'm in the Lord's army and now I'm spent time in the real Marine Corps, the next song that survives the even foggier memory of my childhood is God Be With You Till We Meet Again. I can remember the congregation and choir of that same church in Atchison, Kansas, the one where I learned that army song in the basement. Well, upstairs in the sanctuary, I remember this song, God Be With You Till We Meet Again. The congregation and choir of that church in Atchison, Kansas were singing that song as the benediction every Sunday morning. That congregation and that choir included my grandparents on both sides of my family, including my great-grandmother on my mother's side, aunts and uncles, and a number of church members who were like family to me. And when I hear that song now, wherever I hear it, whenever I think about it, I'm back in that congregation. God be with you till we meet again. By his counsel's guide uphold you, with his sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet. And my two grandfathers battling on the echo. Till we meet. Till we meet. Till we meet. Till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, God be with you till we meet again. My grandmother on my mom's side lived to be 98 years old. She gave me, on her 95th birthday, she gave me the assignment of pulling the family together to sing from the old green book. Honey, you get everybody together. Let's go to Jan's house. We're going to get around the piano and we're going to sing from the old green book. And we ended that time with my 95-year-old grandma singing God Be With You Till We Meet Again. And she lived to be 98, but that was the last time we'd sung together. There are many songs and hymns in my life soundtrack. I'm just sharing with you the ones that echo the loudest. Another of them is Ship Ahoy. I don't know if any of you remember that old solo, Ship Ahoy. As my family of origin moved around the country, we always found a small Southern Baptist church to join. Whether we were in the Carolinas or whether we were in California, somewhere there was a Baptist church. Very small when we were in California back in those days. In fact, the first church we ever joined in a Southern Baptist church we ever joined in California met in a barber shop. It was a barber shop the rest of the week. On Sunday, it was a Southern Baptist church. My Sunday school class was in a VW bus out in the parking lot. So we always found a small Southern Baptist church to join. In most cases, my mother ended up being the choir director, if they had a choir, and the song leader in those little congregations. And she was always the soloist, at least one of the soloists. So I always thought there were little churches and your mom was supposed to direct the choir and sing the solos. I just thought that happened everywhere. I can't tell you what lights went on inside me the first time I saw a church big enough to have a sure enough minister of music. It opened up heaven and earth for me. I remember her singing, my mom singing in these little tiny Southern Baptist churches, her singing a solo, Ship Ahoy, this musical testimony. Of course, the music mattered to me, but the words and their images, the images that the words made fascinated me. Here's the song. I can't remember all of the stanza, but a little bit of the refrain. The stanza goes like this: I was drifting away on life's pitiless sea, and the angry waves threatened my ruin to be. When away at my side, there I dimly descried a stately old vessel, and loudly I cried, ship ahoy, ship ahoy. And loudly I cried, ship ahoy. Well, as the song goes along, that's the ship of salvation and all that kind of thing, as you would imagine. That's in my memory. Fading, obviously. It's not the only thing in my memory that's fading. The next song that stands out amongst the many in my soundtrack is one that came out as I was entering college in August of 1969. Ended up at the little Southern Baptist College in Riverside, California, California Baptist College, which is now a big university. And the song is Pass It On. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. You know that. And soon all those around can warm up in its glowing. That's how it is with God's love. Once you've experienced it, you spread his love to everyone. You want to pass it on. I'll shout it from the mountaintop. I want my world to know the Lord of love has come to me. I want to pass it on. You might be interested to know, I know you know that song and who wrote it, Kurt Kaiser. I'm right now involved in writing Kurt Kaiser's biography. At the request of his family, I'm writing a biography of Kurt Kaiser. But I first encountered that song, 1969, when it was fresh, out as part of Tell It Like It Is. And I was fresh out of the Marine Corps and into college as a freshman in 1969 in California. Then came seminary with its memorable songs. The breadth and depth of church music ministry opened up before me like slow motion video of a rosebud stretching and reaching for the sun. Seminary for me, and I went to New Orleans, seminary for me was an epiphany as big as the first time I saw a church that had a full-time minister of music. That first go around in seminary, when I did my master's degree, gave me additional songs for my life soundtrack. One of them that I remember is a four-hand piano by Emmylou Deemer. Dun, 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 dun. Praise ye the Lord, oh my soul. I will sing praises unto the Lord while I have any being. By the way, she and I are now Facebook friends, Emmylou Deemer. She lives in Santa Barbara in a beautiful home there in Santa Barbara, California. She and I are Facebook friends, and I've shared with her that one of the early songs I remember from my seminary days was "Praise Ye the Lord," four-hand piano, and she just about had a fit that anybody would even remember that. But here's one of the songs that I also remember, and you can just think about this. This kid from all over the country, but learn about church music in tiny little churches. Now going to seminary, and here's one of the songs that I still remember as a soundtrack from that place and that time. New Orleans Seminary, doing my master's degree. He that ruleth, oh, this is the bass part, ruleth over men, must be just, must be just, must be just, rolling in the, you know that one. The last words of David Randall Thompson. By the way, there's no P in Thompson in case you have to take a quiz. I remember that. Just like there's no E in Copeland. Then my full-time churches as minister of music came along. That's what we wanted to do. When I went in to do my master's degree, master in church music, got it in 75. The scene was wide open. You just named where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do, and you pretty much could nail it. And I remember a famous pastor, and I'll think of his name in a minute, it'll come to me, came to New Orleans and he talked to ministers of music. He said, yeah, you guys can go wherever you want to right now. But he said, every sunrise and noontime has its sunset. So enjoy it while you can, to go anywhere. It was really quite prophetic. So I started off at Southside Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. Now, going to Southside Baptist Church in Tempe kept me in touch with my friends that I made as a student getting the master's degree, because most of them were still in the deep South and they wanted to take mission trips west. So they found out I was in Tempe, Arizona, and I got to see all of them pretty regularly, bringing youth groups all the way from 12 to 200 through Tempe, Arizona, and us trying to feed them and give them some place to stay. But it was wonderful. And then after Southside in Tempe, Arizona, First Southern Baptist Church, now Capital City Baptist in Sacramento, California, which was one of the larger Southern Baptist churches in the state, not Baptist, but Southern Baptist. And it was a great experience. My training was put to the test by real people in real life in Arizona and in California. Some of them were transplants from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, but many of them were not. They were in Arizona and in California. They were folks who didn't know, Lottie Moon from a hole in the ground, and were trying to do worship with them. And it was really a remarkable thing. But we were trying to do Southern Baptist worship. That worked with all the Okies and the Arkies that had come out there, but it didn't work with the folks who were born and raised in Arizona and California. And it caused me to look at church music ministry a bit differently. Here's one of the songs from those early days. This one, I taught the choir and then finally taught the congregation how to sing the chorus of this as a benediction. Try to think about a congregation singing, "For you shall go out with joy, be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth into singing, and all the trees shall clap, clap their hands." A Hank Beebe, very jazzy thing. I taught the whole thing to the choir, taught only the chorus to the congregation, and sure enough, those folks could stand out there and sing from memory, "For you shall go out with joy, be led forth with peace." I count that as one of my great achievements in all of life, was to get Hank Beebe into the pews of a church in Southern California, or in California. It was a great place and a great time. Had a lot of fun with that. Here's another one from that same time period, being in Arizona and California. "Because I have been given much, I too must give. Because of thy great bounty, Lord, each day I live. I shall divide my gifts from thee with every brother that I see, who has the need of help from me." Set by Philip Landgrave. one of my most dearly beloved mentors. So I never studied with him. He showed up in my life. Our paths crossed at key moments. Philip Landgrave has now gone on to be with the Lord. He's professor for years at Louisville. When I was in Southside Baptist Church in Tempe, I was trying to get, it had just few kids in the youth choir, and there were only like 6 of them showing up for choir rehearsal, and they didn't want to be there. So with the pastor's permission, I shut down youth choir. I told him I'm going to start it up in 6 months, but don't tell anybody. So I shut it down with not telling anybody I was going to start it up again. And parents and kids came out of the woodwork, upset because we didn't have children's choir, youth choir, though they never showed up for youth choir. So anyway, after a while, that strategy worked, and they were just banging on the doors, and we went from 6 in the youth choir to none in the youth choir to about 80 in the youth choir. And it wasn't because of Tell It Like It Is. It was because I had Phil Landgrave, because I have been given much, I too must give. Phil Landgrave came out, and we did like a 4-day music-led revival. And it was transformative, not only for that church and its music ministry out there in the middle of the desert near Phoenix, but for me. At the end of that time together, I was taking Phil to the airport. And before he got out of the car, he looked at me and he said, I want to talk to you about something. And I said, yes, or what? And he said, stewardship of intellect. And I said, what does that mean? He said, I want you to think about doing a doctorate. And he got out of the car and flew away. That's the kind of conversations I had with Phil Landgrave. I never knew where he's going to show up. I ran into him once in the airport in Charlottesville, West Virginia. I didn't know he was going to be there. And you know how I greeted him? Phil, what do you have to say to me this time? That's how I greeted him every time I ran into him, occasionally from here, here and there and around. So anyway, back to this. Then it was back to seminary, in part because of Dr. Landgrave. For me, my wife, and our 2 very, very small children, all the way from Sacramento, California to New Orleans, Louisiana, in a Ford Pinto station wagon. Now, I want the world to know. I want this video. Everybody watching the video, listen. My wife and I and 2 little babies traveled from Sacramento, California to New Orleans, Louisiana in a Pinto station wagon. Let the world know. We made it by the grace of God. There we, and I mean my wife and I and those kids sacrificing to earn the Doctor of Musical Arts degree, same place, same classrooms, New Orleans Seminary, under the tutelage of maybe one of my greatest mentors, Harry Eskew, who also has gone on to be with the Lord. I went back to study with him. Most of my colleagues from my master's day just called me a glutton for punishment, but I knew there was more I could learn from him, and that turned out to be true. There was a difficult period trying to raise 2 kids. I was minister of music in a little church, and I was cleaning bathrooms in the Baptist bookstore on the New Orleans Seminary campus. My wife was teaching school in downtown New Orleans, and doing other kinds of parties that she would have in different people's homes with sewing stuff. And we were doing everything we could. It was in that situation that one time we got a check in the mail from a church in Tyler, Texas, for $300 out of the clear blue sky. It's been our privilege to give checks of $300 now and then to random students in random churches. It was a difficult period. Here's one of its songs. And I'll tell you why it's one of its songs. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless waves. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue. There are souls to save. Send the light, send the light. There, send the light. There you go. That was one of my grandpa's. Now, that was written by Charles Gabriel. And I ended up doing my doctoral dissertation on the life and work of Charles Gabriel. when I went back that second time for my doctorate. From New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary with a fresh DMA, we moved to Nashville. In fact, it's so fresh, it wasn't even a DMA yet. I went up to Nashville. Moved to Nashville at Sunday School Board, having done all but the dissertation, ABD. And I finished the dissertation in Nashville while working at the Sunday School Board. Went there in the church music department of the Baptist Sunday School Board. 2 songs stand out as the soundtrack for those 11 years. Both of them are hymns. Those of you who know will know when you hear this. One of the hymns from my time in Nashville, it's part of the soundtrack. All hail the power of Jesus' name. Let angels trance. That's the bass part. Opening hymn of Ridgecrest and Glorietta Music Week. Lord, Lord, Lord. During those times, RG knows, Dale knows, others know. During those times, those of us who became veterans of Music Week at Ridgecrest and Glorietta would invite newbies, invite people who were there for the first time to stand by us. The church music department kind of set together, but we would bring people in who'd never been there before just to watch them experience all hail the power of Jesus' name. Watch their knees buckle about 3 measures in, and they had to sit, could not believe what they were hearing and feeling and singing. For special times. All hail the power. The other song that's a part of my soundtrack from those Nashville days is this one. Worthy of worship, worthy of praise, worthy of honor and glory. We were working on the 1991 Baptist hymnal. That is, everybody in the church music department. I was the only cat working on it all day, every day, except Sunday. But other people were very, very involved. One, of course, was Mark Blankenship. I always got to church. I got to work before anybody else. So I would work from 6 o'clock in the morning until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And then go home, take a shower, go to bed, eat, and come back 6 days a week for about 3 years. One morning, Mark Blankenship came walking by my door, and I said, "Hey, Mark, come here. I want to show you something." The night before, when I was driving home down I-65 in Nashville, Worthy of Worship text came to me as you see it in the hymnal. I mean, it just came like I'd known it all my life. All the stanzas were there. So much so that I thought I was remembering one of the thousands of hymns that I'd been looking at in that hymnal project. So I wrote it down. When I got home, I wrote it down. Next morning, I went and checked. Nope, it was nowhere in the records. This was a sure enough new hymn. So Mark walked by, I said, "Hey, Mark," and I handed him a typewritten copy of it. Said, "See if this thing sings." He walked down the hall about 3 doors. He turned around, he came back, and he said, "Yeah, it sings." And he said, "I'll sing it for you tomorrow." So the next morning he shows up. He said, "Follow me." I followed him down to his office where there was a piano, and he played Worthy of Worship as the music that you now know. And we stood there and we just looked at each other like, what do we do with this? Well, we put it into the hymnal process, the hymnal project process, without any names on it. It came in as anonymous. And before it could get through the process, in a plenary session, having heard it, the plenary session voted, put it in the book right now. And Mark and I could not rejoice. We couldn't cry, we couldn't shout. I remember as soon as we had a break, I went to a phone and called my wife to say, "Guess what? Worthy of Worship's in the book." And still couldn't tell anybody for a while. It was my privilege, as I say, to be the project coordinator for the 1991 hymnal during those days. That meant that's all I worked on for all those years. And it was 4 years, the whole process. The release of that hymnal took place on March 14th, 1991, at the Grand Ole Opry House in Nashville. RG, were you there? How about Dale? Were you there? You weren't. March 14th, 1991, Grand Ole Opry House in Nashville, the last night of a 4-day-long praise sing event. It was something. We had the state singing groups from all across the United States, choirs from colleges and universities and seminaries, all of the Southern Baptist recording artists. We were using what's the opera house that they use now, holds 4,000 people. So we had to do back-to-back every evening. We had to do back-to-back sessions, 4,000, get them out of the building, put 4,000 more in and do it again. We did that 4 nights in a row to unveil on the last of those evenings, the 1991 hymnal. I won't take up too much time talking about that event to say that it was heaven come down. It was something else. And for myself and Mark and others that had worked on this hymnal so much, there was such a sense, we were so close to being able to exhale. Here's what I mean by that. We did not yet know, do the people like it? We wouldn't know until the last night, last of those 4 nights when we actually sang from the hymnal. So we're holding our breath. We had been for 4 years. We're holding our breath. And when we sang from the book that last night, the people loved it. And we exhaled. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the people loved it. Up in the balcony of that place were representatives from Word Music, from Gaither Music Publishing, all the folks who had our competitor hymnals that had been turned out in the late 1980s. They were up there to see what's this thing that the Southern Baptists have just done, from 2 no-names. Who's Wes Forbes and who's Terry York? Never heard of them. And they've been helping to put this hymnal together. So there's folks from Word, there's the folks up there from Gaither and other, Paragon and others. And they sat there during the singing, the first singing from the 1991 Baptist hymnal. And we were just singing Heaven Down. And they knew they'd sold their last hymnal to a Southern Baptist church. Now that wasn't our goal, was to put their hymnals out of business, but it was a good indicator. It was the first dial on the dashboard for me to look up there and see those guys just kind of closing up their stuff and getting ready to go. When it was over, Mark and I got our wives, my wife Jana, his wife Judy, and we went to eat at whatever restaurant was still open. And on the way out, we went by the bunch from Word. And they congratulated us, but they were kind of, like little puppies leaving. They congratulated us, and Mark and I just looked at each other like, yes, now we can exhale. Not only do Southern Baptists love it, but our competitors know. Well, that night, before we were going to dinner, before we had that little encounter with the competitors, I was signing autographs. I'd been on the stage. I was hanging out with all the big cats. Folks were coming by to see me, congratulating me and Mark and others, not just the 2 of us, a whole slew of people. And people like RG had hymns and things in the book and all of this kind of stuff. We were signing autographs and congratulations. And it was just wonderful. I was having a hard time keeping my feet on the ground. So Mark and Judy and Jana and I decided to go have dinner. We went to a restaurant to have dinner, and Mark and I, all we could talk about was how great the evening was. And did you see this person? Did you see that person? Yeah. And and they asked for an autograph. And it was just wonderful. Well, then it's time we finished, decided we better go home, call it a day. And in the car, my wife was silent. And this had been a big deal. And I'm thinking, what's going on? So I said, did you see so-and-so? And they were there. Did you see so-and-so? And wasn't she wonderful when she sang? And wasn't that group wonderful? Yes, she was agreeing. That was all very great. That was very wonderful. And I said, man, I think I have writer's cramp. I'm signing all these books and all that kind of stuff. She didn't say a thing. Then we pulled into the driveway that led to our garage in Nashville. The garages are all behind the house in Nashville. So we're going down this driveway behind the house. I pull into the garage and she said this, their first words since dinner: tomorrow is trash day. That's what my wife said to me on the last night of praise sing too. The night when we had blown all other hymnals out of Baptist churches. The night when I had signed autographs. The night that I'd been on the last night I'd been on the stage at Grand Ole Opry. She said nothing after dinner until we got home. Tomorrow is trash day. If any of you ever write my story, I want that to be the title. So from Nashville, we moved to Dallas, Texas, where I was for 3 years, the associate pastor at Park Cities Baptist Church. There is a song, a hymn for that time as well. I was there for 3 years. A hymn by Horatius Bonar. Not what my hands have done can save my guilty soul. Not what my toiling flesh has borne can make my spirit whole. Not what I feel or do can give me peace with God. Not all my prayers and sighs and tears can bear my awful load. We're there for 3 years. That hymn was set by David Schwabel as a gift to me by Park Cities Baptist Church when I left there after 3 years to go to come here to Baylor University, specifically to Truett Seminary. That was nearly 25 years ago. And there is a song for this time of my life, especially, and is there one? You might ask, is there a song in this time of life as I near retirement? Yes, there is. And this is the song. The Lord, whom we love, whom we worship and adore, we will serve throughout this coming week. He it is who binds us together, and he it is who sends us apart. To be God's people, be God's people. Amen. That's the last song, The Lord Whom We Love, from God's People, a musical by Charlie Brown and Kurt Kaiser. Kurt Kaiser became a dear friend of mine here in Waco, a dear friend. And that's the song, The Lord Whom We Love, whom we worship and adore, we will serve throughout this coming week. He it is who binds us together, and he it is who sends us apart to be God's people. Amen. That's the overview of my life and ministry in a nutshell, and the soundtrack that goes with it. And I'm open, Kyle, to any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Dr. York. Terry, as we in this group collectively know you in different ways, I always feel like, especially after listening to you, calling you Dr. York right now. Consummate teacher. Questions from the classroom?
Or remembrances. Maybe I stirred up some dust that you'd like to talk about.
Terry, I will always remember as a young, well, first of all, you can't talk about Ridgecrest and not mention Nibblenook. Yeah. Or or your first kiss in the prayer garden, right? I mean, let's talk about Ridgecrest.
That was not my first one.
Let's just get down to it. What's funny is paths that I didn't realize that we crossed. My dad went to Southern, and so he was on staff at Hurstbourne. My mom and dad. So I was a young little tyke watching Phil Landgrave compose music in the middle of the service and hand it to the instrumentalist. And I mean, he was always cranking it out. And so I appreciate you mentioning his name. The memory I have for you, I was so appreciative. And, I reached out to you at South Main about that Celebrating Grace rollout that I was there. And I just appreciated your words of passing the torch. And I thought how well if any of you guys were there at the Celebrating Grace premiere, I just thought the words and how you artistically and poetically communicated the role of this hymnal, but also a charge to those who were seniored in the group, seasoned, And when we talk about the polyphony and its role and how we foster and care for those in the different facets of our ministry and seasons of our ministry, I just thought you did a good job for a young guy like me, new in the ministry. I feeling charged, but also charging the senior folks there, saying, "Hey, help pass that baton." Anyway, I just really thought that was a formidable moment in memory for me, feeling like I belong, but also that, a sense of charge for the young and the old, and how we move forward in this calling that we all share. So
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry, I'm thinking a lot. I think about the word sustainability in these days, and that's one of the things Polyphony is working on. We all recognize that religious life in North America has changed. Maybe post-pandemic, church music ministry, we're continuing to have to adapt to new normal, whatever that means. But I'm really interested in, and I wonder if some of my colleagues here are interested in, what is it that will sustain us going forward, personally, spiritually, vocationally? And I'm sure you've thought about that. You and I have had conversations about that over the years. I'd love to hear some of your comments about how do we sustain whatever it is we're called to do wherever we are.
Okay, and I'll try to do it quickly. This obviously, Doug, could be a session all to itself for Polyphony, and you're doing that in other venues as well. I like to think of the lockdown during COVID as being, this is not my phrase, but I love it, a terrible springtime. And that the green shoots that come out of that quarantine, where the churches had to go online like we are now, that kind of thing, is being a terrible springtime. And one of the things that we learned, Doug, that I think is very important, is some of the things that we thought were essential, the church walked away from easily, without a care, walked away from those things that we thought were essential, and we were stunned. How could they get along without that and that and that? We thought these were so important, so essential. The church taught us what really matters if we're smart enough to pay attention. The question right now is not how do we get them back? The question right now is, why did they leave? How could they leave something we thought was so important, so central? How come they could just walk away like nothing happened? That's the question we ought to be asking. And then if we will focus on those things that stayed, those things that they didn't walk away from, the things that survived the quarantine, that's what we ought to build on. And just let go of the things we thought were great, but they could walk away from it without a thought. Now, what remains? I often say this to my students, and again, this is not something I dreamed up, it's something I stole, but if you had to if you're on Sunday morning, they tell you you've got to pack this empty suitcase and get out of town as quick as you can for whatever reason, what would you take with you from the church? What would you take with you? What would you throw in that suitcase? That's what's essential. And that's what we found out in the quarantine. Let's build, Doug, on what survived the quarantine and let go of the things that didn't survive the quarantine as far as church is concerned. I'll stop there. I could talk on that for a long time.
Thank you. Good question, Terry. Your response reminded me of students like Tracy Jernigan here, Tracy Gray at the time at Baylor.
And Sarah sitting over there.
And
she may have heard that little speech before too.
Yeah. And what I was thinking about is, as a student at Baylor Truett years ago, when you and David Music and Randall Bradley were all teaching together, working together, that we called Randall Dr. Howe, David Music Dr. Watt, and you Dr. Y. So when you said, why did they leave? It just brought back, that's your strength, your giftedness as a teacher of asking why. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I know one of my other nicknames was T-Dog, and I'm still trying to figure out if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know.
I think it's good.
Well, on that note, I'll share a quick memory. As Kyle said, we were students of Dr. York's when he had his dual appointment in the grad school at Baylor Church Music and at Truett from 2000 to 2003. And Dr. York, I don't know if you can imagine how many music ministers' lives that you've touched and influenced, me being one of them. And I'm forever grateful for that. I don't know what Truett Worship Studies looks like without you. And that is a testimony to your 25 years of service and dedication and love for your students and love of teaching us. And I'm forever grateful. One memory in the spring of 2002, when we moved into the current campus at Truett from First Baptist Waco, a couple of the creative students, such as Kyle and I and some of our other music colleagues, peers, we started a variety show. And I think it may still be going, I'm not sure. But we started a variety show since we had our own building. And one of the things we love to do was poke a little bit of fun at our professors. And Kyle, did you play Dr. York? I cannot remember.
I don't.
Somebody did, but I don't remember who. But our favorite thing to say about Dr. York was, you can't have worship because that was one thing he said a lot. You can't have worship and patriotism. It doesn't work. Worship is worship. And I'm curious as to what, if you've added on to that over the 20 years. Our other favorite thing to do was to take off our glasses and say, let's chase that rabbit. That was something he frequently said in class.
See how risky it is to be a professor? Goodness.
So risky, but it was all done out of love. And thank you for your 25 years and for speaking into our lives and shaping our ministries as well.
Thank you, Tracy. That means the world to me. The worship and thing that hung in the air for so many years sort of faded away, but I came at it from another direction. I came at it from other directions. Worship and was replaced by a little black bag of artifacts that I would pull out that showed what else would like to attach itself to worship. And by the way, patriotism wasn't the only thing. And but yeah, worship and hung in the air, but that phrase wasn't always put on the board for 25 years. So I finally moved a bit beyond that method, but not beyond that message.
Others?
Hey, good to see you.
I'm going to give a current events report, and I'm going to create a sin problem for everyone else on this call, in that you're going to struggle with envy when I tell you that Terry York and I get to have lunch about once a month, and Terry's still investing in people, even old people like me. And for that, I am most grateful.
Thank you, Charlie.
Dr. York, I just want to know what you said to your wife after she said tomorrow's trash day.
You know what I did? I stopped the car. We hadn't got into the garage yet. We were still in the driveway. I stopped the car and I looked at her. I just looked at her and I said, thank you. Thank you. And I said, did I need that? And she said, yeah, you needed it. And so that was the conversation. And sure enough, I took the garbage out that night and put it out at the end of the driveway. And I was back on earth again. But I just thanked her and asked if I really needed it. And she said, yeah, you did. We talked about that every once in a while.
I got a quick question. How did you recover from 3 years of working from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m.?
I'm still recovering, Charlie, and I mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
I'm still not allowing myself to do that anymore. I'm still trying to do a better job at Sabbath, but as I understood, as I read the tea leaves at the time in the situation, I didn't have much choice, but I knew I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. And it's what's launched me into the white space in my calendar now and how I embrace Sabbath. So in a way, there's still ripples from that. I didn't take vacation, Charlie, for 4 years, but at Wes Forbes's request, we worked all year round, but he sent Jana and me to Hawaii when the book came out, so that made up for it.
Wow. These are good questions. Any others or memories, reflections?
Thanks for bringing us along on the memory lane. I confess that the deep theology and memorable tune of I'm in the Lord's Army, I had not thought about for I don't know how many years, but so many of the other things you mentioned, the hymns that were important to you, were important, I'm sure, to many of us. The Ridgecrest memory of singing All Hail the Power, when you mentioned that, the goosebumps, they were still had that power. Thanks, Terry, for all you've done.
Well, thank you, Dale. And you're right. Those residual goosebumps are from that music, but from that week and from those people. And those memories are still there. And I'm very much aware from the moment that Kyle and Doug asked me to do this to this moment, I'm very much aware that everyone on the screen could do what I just did. It would be different story, different songs, but could still do the same thing. And let's make sure that our people in our congregation can say that because of our ministry, that they could have a similar kind of thing from beginning to end with a soundtrack that they could identify. And I'm not the only one that can do that. Everyone can do that. And let's make sure that that continues. But thank you, Dale. That, yeah, wonderful, wonderful memories. And the memories, while there's a soundtrack, the core of the memories are all people at each place.
Amen.
That's Diet Pepsi, by the way.
What's that?
Diet Pepsi.
So that's what keeps you going from 6 to 1 a.m. in those days too.
I didn't have time to drink anything.
Well, I don't want, I'm torn between not wanting to rush anyone if anyone's got a question or feedback, and also knowing aware of the time. So speak now or forever holdeth thy tongue. I had told Dr. York that I wanted to offer a blessing on behalf of us here, and then, but I wanted him to have the final word with a benediction, and so we're going to come to that time now. And Dr. York, a statement before I read this blessing, just a statement that was written by one of your colleagues as I asked them to send me their thoughts and words, sentiments. This thank you, this was written by one. Thank you for blowing wind into the sails of pastoral musicians for these many years. And this blessing, as you begin your retirement, we hope you may not fully retire. We pray as much as it is an ending of a brilliant career, that it will be a new beginning of richer and restful and fulfilling days to come. And as you exit the proverbial busy and congested highway you've been on, and discover yourself on the back roads, the quieter back roads of your retirement, may you tune your heart to continually sing of God's grace. And may the Spirit inspire the poet all the more to compose new songs full of grace and truth. And may God's richest blessings be upon you, Terry, your wife, Jana, and your whole family.
Thank you, Kyle. And at Kyle's request, I've written a benediction, and I offer this benediction to you. I hope that you will receive it. And now, to you who have been called to sing amid the shouts and cries and slogans, to you who have been called to sing love to hearts full of hate, to sing truth in the cacophony of falsehood, to sing community in the barren places of isolation, to sing peace in the midst of deadly conflict, to sing embrace in the midst of denial, to you, musicians of the song of grace. May God grant always yet another song of courage to be hummed until God's words appear at the time of testing. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. York. And everyone, this was just rich today.